Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Proverbs 29, and this is a very power-packed chapter full of proverbs, wisdom. Okay, so let's get into it. We left off at verse 15, but we're going to get through it. It's like I say, sometimes with these words of wisdom, it's worth kind of just exploring them, exploring. Even though they're self-explanatory, all of the proverbs are, most of them, and but they're worth us looking at them more closely. Here we go, chapter 29, and in verse number we left off in verse 15. Uh, Here we go. All right, I'll get it together here. We left off in verse 15. Now, I'm going to read it, but then just a couple of verses, you'll see he kind of repeats another Proverbs connected to verse 15 again. A rod of correction imparts wisdom, but a youth left to himself is a disgrace to his mother. Now, I left off kind of talking about how if your children are left to themselves, there is no discipline, there's no instruction, there's no nurturing. If they're left to themselves, they'll be disgraced. Now, verse 16 says, when the wicked increase, rebellion increases, but the righteous will see the downfall. Now that's true. I want to say this, however, it doesn't mean that every righteous person who is experiencing this. Um, every now and then, however, you do see justice. I mean, like for example, think about the generation that saw the downfall, the breakup of the Soviet Union. Every now and then you see it. Okay. Verse 17, discipline your son, and it will bring you peace of mind and give you a delight. Now, again, we kind of dealt with that again. Notice if you discipline your son. Now, the idea too is, as we said before, if you discipline your children at the when it is time, like I say, let's say during their formative years, that's when you could mold and shape their minds that they're going in the right way. Okay? So discipline your son, and it will bring you peace of mind. Now think about this now. If you don't discipline your children, you will have heartache all through their adult life. Okay? You will have heartache all through their life. You get that phone call, or they are grief. Uh Discipline your son, and it will bring you peace of mind. Now again, part of the discipline is a corrective form. So you're not disciplining your children because you're angry. You're disciplining your children because you want to correct them. Because that's the difference in the godly purpose of raising kids. The worldly way of raising kids, remember, they don't have a godly end to that. So, so the reason why we would discipline our children is because we want to correct them, impart wisdom and discipline for them to be a disciplined person. In other words, not giving in to their ungodly needs. All right, verse 17, their ungodly desires and inclinations. Discipline your son, and it will bring peace of mind, and they will give you they will give you delight. So when your kids come out right, they will be a joy to you. But if they are, if you're always getting a phone call about whatever trouble they're in, notice he said it won't be a peace of mind to you. Verse 18, without revelation, people run wild. The one who listens to instructions will be happy. Now, the idea, think about this, without revelation. Now, as God gives revelation, okay, as God gives revelation, notice he said if we don't have that, the people run wild. One of the reasons why we have the Word of God, okay, revelation, and the Word of God is revelation, is to keep the people of God, right, on track. Now think about those churches, those patches where you see all this wild stuff going on. And so, case in point, right? That's a good case in point. I just saw a video of a pastor in worship, or somebody in worship on roller skates. Just an example, okay? Just an example. Um, Verse 19: a slave cannot be disciplined by words, though he understands, he doesn't respond. Now this is kind of interesting because it's a little tricky for us, touchy, because he is talking about slave, and slaves had no rights. And so the idea is that here we can just take this for face value that Solomon is just giving insight, not necessarily instructions. However, you can't escape the instruction. And when it comes to slavery, this is where we get really, really touchy as people of God because of the issue of slavery. If I'm a slave owner, this is wisdom to me. A slave cannot be disciplined by words. Though he understands, he doesn't respond. Right? That's wisdom for slavery. Not comforting. It's certainly not satisfying to us who are affected, have been affected by slavery, and just even to seeing the righteousness of slavery. A slave cannot be disciplined by words. All right, I'm going to move on from this, but this is a touchy issue here. Verse 20. Do you see a man who speaks too soon? There is more hope of a fool than for him. How many times, in many ways, many applications, have we done that? Speaking too soon. Waiting for all the information, waiting for all of the facts before we rush to judgment. Many applications there. I still do it and regret it. Speaking too soon. Verse 21, a slave pampered from his youth will become arrogant later on. Now, again, this is a kind of a touchy subject in terms of slavery, right? Slavery is very sensitive to us. But when I think about, if you do know, because he's actually giving wisdom to slave masters here. A slave pamper. In other words, keep a slave in their place. Of course, the problem is that this is coming from the Bible. So how do we process this? We don't. Slavery was a part of human history. This is not to say right or wrong. And if you want to say, well, how come God did not just simply say no slavery? That I cannot answer you. But if I'm a slave owner, this is wisdom. A slave pampered from his youth will become arrogant later on. Now, if I give you an example of that, that would be Hagar, Abraham's slave, who acted, when I say acted, it's because of Sarah and them sort of, hey, Hagar, we need a child. You're going to be a surrogate. And thus Ishmael was born. And things just were never the same after that. Hagar did become sort of arrogant, got out of her place as a slave. And the Bible tells us that Sarah dealt with her, right? She kind of despised, hey, I've been with your husband. I'm pregnant by your husband. And then when Ishmael was born, they mocked. And then Sarah was like, throw the slave out. Okay. So again, this is a little touchy because again, it talks about wisdom for slave masters. This is if you own slaves here. A slave pampered from his youth. Now, on the other hand, Eleazar, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Eleazar, Abraham's slave, was a faithful slave, but a slave nonetheless. So, like I say, this issue of slavery here, when it comes to reckoning with it with biblical justice, admittedly, this is a hard pill to swallow. All right, verse 22. An angry man stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered man increase rebellion. Now, I've seen that as a manager. When an angry man stirs up conflict, that's all anger will do, stir up conflict. So this, looking at it from both ways here. One, if you're angry, all you're going to accomplish is stir up conflict. You're not going to really accomplish anything. On the other side of that, watch out for people who are angry because all they do is stir up conflict. So he said a hot-tempered man increases rebellion. So the idea is that you're going to have to, if you're a manager, leader, whatever, squash that rebellion. Verse 23, a person's pride will humble him, but a humble spirit will gain honor. Again, the contrast here, a person's pride will humble him. So true. Okay, a person's pride will humble him. He says, but a humble spirit will gain honor. Verse 24, to be a thief's partner is to hate oneself. He who hears the curse but will not testify. Now, notice he says to be a thief's partner is to hate oneself. We tell our youth, don't hang out with people that's going to do crime. I learned that early on when I was a teenager, in fact a senior. And I would be hanging out with my friends and they would say, hey, we're going to go steal a car. I'd be like, I'm going the other way. That not everyone in this sense will have that common sense or wisdom. Okay? And we know by our laws just to be. If you're in company when crime happens, you're going down. So he says to be a thief's partner, right? If you're going to be a partner in someone, then he says that is to hate oneself. And to hear the curse, he hears the curse but will not testify. Verse 25, the fear of man is a snare, but the one who trusts in the Lord is protected. The fear of man is a snare or trap, he says, but the one who trusts in the Lord is protected. Sometimes you cannot help but, notice he said fear of man. The fear of man, what does that mean? If you're always fearful of men, again, how do you apply that? He said the fear of man is a trap. If you are afraid, I'll give you kind of a broad. Remember, these proverbs have so many applications to them. But he says the fear of man is a snare or a trap. I think about the political um, 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 landscape today, where you got a wicked man, and an entire party is afraid of that one wicked man. That's a trap they can't get out of. Okay, that's just an example of that. Verse 26: Many seek a ruler's favor, but the man receives justice from the Lord. Many seek a ruler's favor. Now, back then, remember, kings ruled. Their word was the end, beginning and end. And so one of the ways you would get justice is that you would go to the you could go to the king and ask for justice. We see this throughout the Old Testament. In fact, one time David was asked for justice. I mean, we can go many examples of this. But it all depends. But you were limiting yourself to then if that was a good king or a bad king. So he says, many seek the favor, but a man receives justice from the Lord. Now, what this is not saying is not going through the legal processes. Okay, that's not what that is saying here. Or following the law. In other words, just say, I'm just going to seek God for justice from the Lord. Well, and again, yes, that's only half of the statement. In other words, so now what does God may tell you? Follow through with the law. Like now, I would tell people right now, having been burned many times, when you enter into a contract with someone, make sure that you read the contract. Make sure the contract is in favor of you or has your best interest at heart. Verse 27, an unjust man is detestable to the righteous, but one whose way is upright is detestable to the wicked. So again, the contrast, when you see the wicked, it is detestable, the way they act, the way they process life. But on the other hand, the wicked is the same. The wicked is detestable. The upright is detestable to the wicked. Okay. All right. Um, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. As always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.